in a move to transform the country's creative economy, the federal government of Nigeria has announced a 3-year partnership with Chocolate City Group, one of Nigeria's leading media and entertainment companies. The Memorandum of Understanding signed in Abuja, Nigeria's capital, by the Minister of Arts, Culture and the Creative Economy, Barrister Hannatu Musawa, will concentrate on developing small-scale live arenas nationwide, identifying and nurturing talent, creating global distribution channels for Nigerian content, and strengthening intellectual property frameworks. Maikori, the co-founder and chairman of Chocolate City Group, pointed out the strategic timing of the partnership, indicating that Nigeria's music industry generates around $2 billion annually, a sizable portion of the $26 billion global music economy. Now, he joins us from our Abuja studios to discuss this landmark deal. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being here. Can you hear me, Audu?
Yes, I can.
All right, fantastic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So let's get straight into it. Now, the partnership between Chocolate City and the federal government, of course, being described as a landmark deal. Talk to us about the elements of what is in that memorandum of understanding. What exactly is it going to do for the creative economy, as it were?
So first of all, I would like to say that this is unprecedented in many ways, but in the history of Nigeria, we've never had a ministry focused until the administration of President Tinubu, which appointed Barrister Musa as the minister. I think right from policy about not just the agenda, but actually consulting at each time with stakeholders. So I remember the first engagement was sometime this year we're going to be 20. Having spent this time in the industry, we've been around the block a bit. We've seen quite a few of the issues. And one thing that you find out that the private sector can do only so much, but without sometimes the government regulation, the policies and the enforcement, what you're dealing with very brilliant. So the primary underlying theme is intellectual property. An understanding of that, the protection of that, and the enforcement of that is going to be it's the foundation of any kind of wealth they can create. So that there's a correlation between IP protection and GDP of the country. So if Nigeria is focused on growing itself economically, the creative sector is a huge opportunity. So the idea behind the MOU really is saying, how does the private sector, so this is not just about Chocolate City, this is about the whole sector. How can we work with having, we've been there for 20 years, so we know a bit about the problems. And we see that there are problems around infrastructure. We think there are problems around IP protection. In fact, IP education. We think there are issues also even with how you enforce. How much does the police know? How does the court system help to enable the protection of people? So there are quite a few things. And this is an initial plan. And that is, how do we get stakeholders the critical resources that they need? And how do we build other hubs around the country so that the concentration is not in only one place? As you know, Lagos is a hub for not just Nigeria, but Africa and probably. But we think that there's a need to also not decentralize, but create other opportunities for young people, because we're talking about a population of 214 million people, 70% of which are below the ages of 25. How do we make sure they're able to get engaged in this gig economy that can create jobs and wealth for people?
Okay, all right. Welcome to the show, Audu. All right, so now how do you intend to achieve the distribution side to this project, to ensure that it gets to every corner of the country, developing the small-scale live arenas like my colleague Shaitan read in the intro. How do you intend to actually even identify these talents? Because we have loads of them in Nigeria. And is this project mainly for maybe people in music? Can you tell us more about people that can benefit from it?
So the idea really is around the establishment of creative hubs. As you might know, there are tons, and when I say tons, I mean literally thousands of existing government-owned buildings and even private sector buildings that are not being utilized properly. We think that the opportunity then is to find private companies through a PPP model that will take over these places and equip them. But we're also going to take opportunities of the funding that's available. As you might know, there's probably $1.5, $2 billion in funding for the creative sector. Afri-Exim Bank alone has announced over $2 billion in the past 3 years for the creative sector. There's Nexim Bank, there's BOI, there's the IDICE project, there's AFDB. So there are lots of funds, but the problem now is how do you identify the people that can access that funding, and how do you create collaborations that can make almost partnerships that allow companies to access that level of funding. So I'll give you an example. If you think about the film industry in Nigeria today, you cannot talk about film without talking about the music part of it. You might notice too that when you look at the average production, there are issues with sound. For example, if you're outside, there's a lot of noise. The voices are not, they're not really as crisp as they should be. This is an infrastructure problem. There's something called, we call them film studios, but they're primarily called sound stages. And they're called sound stages because there is the acoustics and also the technology that is able to create the best sound and create a better filming experience. Now, the problem sometimes with production is that you also find that there are not enough editing and post-production facilities. You find that people are flying to South Africa and other parts of the world to go and finish their movies. These things can be done here. I think, and this is the view of many stakeholders from all our investigations, that Nigeria does have the talent, we just don't have the infrastructure. So instead of building things from scratch, what we're doing is finding old, existing infrastructure and turning them out and renovating them and now training people to work. If you think about China and how China became a global powerhouse, what they did was massify the ability to create products and services. What we don't have today is places where you can say, look, I want to create if you can find 1,000 movie directors who are trained, who are certified. But the program also has to do a lot with the skills. So we're not just doing education for the sake of education. You can get a degree, but the idea then is that how does the vocation itself, how does that skill set lead to your ability to generate revenue and to get jobs? So the idea really is around building that and connecting people. Now, we've also done a lot of work internationally. Let me just say this is now our first hurrah with the government of Barbados over the past 2 or 3 years around their film and tax incentive policy with a focus on building sound stages. The same thing with the government as well. So this is not really necessarily more that gives us more pride and joy than to work in Africa's most populous nation that has the greatest amount of talent and has now become the epicenter of culture around the world. So that is the plan. The details are going to be rolled out. So this is not just another.
This is not another situation of Dempsey. Okay, because we know you personally, so we're going to hold you accountable. Yeah, and you have played a pivotal role in discovering
you have to.
and developing some of Africa's most celebrated artists. But because of time, now looking back, what lessons or insights would you say you'd be bringing into this new phase of structured collaboration on one end? Then secondly, with Nigeria's music industry estimated to be generating around $2 billion annually, a significant chunk of the global music economy, can you reiterate how you think this partnership can even unlock greater economic value, not just in terms of export revenue, but also in job creation and even the overall GDP contribution? We're just talking about Burna Boy selling an 80,000 capacity stadium in France without a hitch.
Exactly.
Can we see that in the next couple of years in Nigeria?
So I'll tell you one thing. Many people are critical about government's role. The creative industry has actually grown without government participation. But I think that's not just about the government. I think it's really about how the private sector partners with the government to get the kind of support that they need to move things forward. Anywhere in the world, there's nowhere that the private sector succeeds to a certain level or over a certain level without some kind of government regulation or support. What we're trying to do is make sure we're able and we're practical. And so in terms of the implementation, we'll be very, very involved in that implementation. Now, when you talk about the government, the global sales of Nigerian music, especially Afrobeat music, as it were, and talking about live arenas, these are the things that we're trying to tackle. Is that enough that Burna Boy can sell 80,000 outside the world and cannot sell even 8,000 in Nigeria? The reason is that there isn't infrastructure. Now, is there existing infrastructure? Yes, there is. Now, how do you ensure that there's an agreement between the states, between the private sector, between investors that come in and put their money, fix the infrastructure, they make their money over a period of time, so it's not charity. But the point is that we have veritable places where this can happen. A good example is the National Theatre, for example, which has recently been completed, has got a world-class 4,000 capacity venue. When it opens, and I understand it's going to open very shortly, you're looking at easily 10,000 jobs in that platform. How does that work? It had to be a private sector partnership between the government and I believe the central bank committee that made this happen. A huge investment, about over 20 billion naira. So we think that the private sector is ready to do that, but it's not going to happen without having these kind of relationships. So you can hold us to that, but more importantly, we can hold all of us to that, because our stake and our interest in this is if the global, so I said federal infrastructure for music and creative sector works, then Chocolate definitely benefits from that. So it's almost selfish, but also altruistic at the same time, because if it succeeds, we all succeed. Yeah. Lastly, when you're talking about the jobs, think about this way. If you look at one movie production, you're talking about easily 100 to 200 million people, 200 people on a movie. Now, if you think about this, like maybe Black Panther. Black Panther was a $200 million projection. I think over a period of 3-4 months, it hired at least 3,000 different people. Now, what we're saying is that we cannot attract the big productions to Nigeria without taking care of certain things. Tax incentives, the infrastructure, the staff. If you're doing a movie production anywhere else in the world, you need a pool of at least 10 times the staff that you need. So, for example, if you needed 40 gaffers, you need to pick from a pool of 400 people. So the idea is, how do you scale and massify that training? How do you find and select these people, and how do you get them to work? And how do we attract foreign people, not just Nigerian productions?
We will take final video.
Nigeria has that potential, but it has to be a joint effort, and that is what the partnership is all about. So it's not just between us and the government, but with the private sector as well.
Okay, all right, Audu, before we leave you now, I like the fact that you're talking about identifying talent. And, during your days, when you were still CEO of Chalk City, we saw how big the label was, in identifying talent. And in fact, then Chalk City had a plethora of artists that were popping like in every corner of Africa and the world. But people have a lot of Chalk City fans have said that the presence of Chalk City has diminished a bit. Now, from the time you left as CEO, that was in 2015, and MI took over, till now, what do you think you maybe might have done differently that would have still left Chalk City on the map, where it was at the time and today? Like, real quick.
Well, I hear those questions a lot, but I think brands evolve. Chocolate City now as an institution, we're not a young brand as we were 20 years ago. Therefore, you hear about the artists and you may not hear about the talent. So, for example, a bunch of people don't know some of the on Chocolate City. There's Young John, there's Black Bones, we manage Femi Kuti, there's Tariq, there's Noonday, there are a bunch of other people that are all upcoming on the label. So I don't think it will be the same presence as, say, a brand new young label, because, like I said, most of our mates are sort of not in. But I think the lesson that we've learned from that really is that as a company, we never were just a record label. We were always a group of companies with 5 different verticals. So we've been in film, we're in publishing, we're in F&B, we have a brand agency. So I would say there's an evolution of a brand, not shall I say, doing the same thing over the same period of time.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the time today, Audu Maikori. And good luck on the project, and of course, happy 20th anniversary to Chalk City.
All right, then thank you so much. You've been watching Arise 360 with me, Shaiton Atigarin.
And with me, Ken Onyokolo. That's all on the show today. Thanks so much for hanging with us. Goodbye.